Okay, let's dive in. We've gathered quite a collection of sources for you today.
Hmm.
We've got articles from PBS News, Al Least, Al Jazeera, some Wikipedia context on the Iran-Israel proxy conflict,
Hmm.
and an analysis piece digging into geopolitical tensions and, well, domestic security, too.
Right. And our goal here, as always, is to really sift through all that material, cut through the noise, and pull out the key insights for you.
Exactly. Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed quickly but thoroughly on some pretty significant things happening around mid-June 2025.
And the picture these sources paint is, well, it's complex. We're seeing interconnected challenges. You might read about a military parade here in the U.S., and then totally separate headlines about conflict escalating in the Middle East.
But are they really separate?
Right.
That's what we want to explore. How do these things, seemingly worlds apart, maybe reflect bigger trends in security, both globally and right here at home?
Good question. So where do we start? That event here in the U.S.?
Yeah, let's start with the domestic picture.
Uh,
Our sources detail this big military parade planned for Washington, D.C. It's set for Saturday, June 14th.
okay. And the official reason is the U.S. Army's 250th birthday, a major anniversary.
It is, and the scale seems pretty significant. We're talking thousands of soldiers, dozens of, well, massive military vehicles, aircraft, all on the National Mall.
So a big show. What kind of hardware are we talking about?
It's quite a mix, actually. They're aiming for a historical sweep, so troops in old uniforms alongside things like World War II-era Jeeps, the Ford GPWs and Sherman tanks.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, right alongside modern gear. M1A2 Abrams tanks, Black Hawk helicopters, Bradley fighting vehicles, Apache helicopters, the whole spectrum.
And aircraft, too, you mentioned.
Flyovers planned. Includes things like B-25 Mitchell bombers, P-51 Mustangs again, WWII Icons, and C-37 Skytrain transport planes.
Sounds like quite the aerial display. Any other sort of spectacle elements?
Well, the Army's parachute team, the Golden Knights, they're apparently expected to jump onto the ellipse.
Okay. Always popular.
And there's a festival, too, near the Smithsonian Castle. More equipment on display there, including drones, apparently, for the public to see up close.
Right. Now, inevitably, an event like this raises questions about cost. Did the sources mention that?
They did. The estimated price tag is somewhere in the range of $25 billion to $45 million for the whole day's events.
25 to 45 million? That's not insignificant.
No. And Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll is quoted saying, he hopes it offers an opportunity to boost recruitment.
A practical justification, perhaps?
And they've even thought about the road. Apparently, the tanks have new rubber track pads to minimize damage.
Okay, practical detail. And VIPs.
Expected attendees include President Trump and Secretary Driscoll himself.
Got it. So, the date, June 14th, it is the actual anniversary of the Army's founding back in 1775.
Correct. Historically accurate date. But, and this is where our sources show things get, let's say, complicated. There's significant political pushback.
Okay. Not just a simple birthday party, then. What's the criticism?
Well, Democrats are framing it very differently. They're suggesting the event is less about the Army and more about celebrating the president himself.
Why, specifically?
Because his 79th birthday also happens to fall on that same Saturday, June 14th.
I see. That timing does add a layer. And how are others reacting? Veterans, for example.
The sources suggest they're quite divided. You have some who see it as, a proper commemoration of military history, honoring service. Totally valid view.
But others?
Others strongly object. They point right back to that price tag, the $45 million, especially when contrasted with potential cuts to the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Right. Or other ongoing military policy debates.
Exactly, like the effort to remove transgender troops. So some veterans see the parade as maybe papering over those more difficult issues.
That makes sense. What about the broader public? Any polling data in the sources?
Yes, one poll mentioned found roughly 6 out of 10 U.S. adults felt the parade wasn't a good use of government money.
6 in 10. That's a majority.
And what's striking is how widespread that feeling is across party lines. It includes 80% of Democrats, sure, but also 72% of independents and even 35% of Republicans. So significant skepticism even within the president's own party.
Interesting. Any expert commentary on this?
There is. Richard Cohn, an emeritus professor, is quoted. He calls it a typical personalization of national life by the president.
Personalization, meaning?
Meaning using national institutions like the military for sort of political and, well, he says egotistical terms, Cohn argues this is actually a mark of weakness and diminishes the Army's real importance.
Strong words. Does he compare it to past parades?
He does. He contrasts it with, say, Eisenhower's big parade after World War II. That had a clear purpose celebrating a major victory. Cohn finds this one inappropriate and ridiculous, specifically because of that link to the president's birthday.
And the New York Times piece you mentioned.
Yeah, that article called it the largest military exhibition in D.C. since that post-WWII parade under Eisenhower. The most impressive display of, quote, war technology in recent memory.
So, a massive display, but wrapped in controversy about its purpose, cost, and timing. What about protests? Are any expected at the parade?
The sources mentioned security preparations, like fencing going up. Federal law enforcement is monitoring, but they say they have no specific intelligence about protests planned right at the parade site in D.C.
Okay. But maybe elsewhere?
Yes. A group called the No Kings Movement is mentioned. They're planning protests against what they call strongman politics and corruption on Saturday.
But not in D.C.
Their strategy, according to the source, is different. They plan to act everywhere else across the country, aiming to make nationwide action the main story, rather than confronting the parade directly.
Interesting tactical choice. So this domestic event, while celebrating history, is really tangled up in current politics, public opinion, and these fundamental questions about military symbolism and resources at home.
Exactly. And that theme of the military's role domestically,
Right.
it connects to another thread in our sources. The actual or potential use of military forces in domestic situations, not just parades. The sources mention protests happening elsewhere, like in Los Angeles, related to immigration sweeps.
Ah, okay. And the military connection there.
One LES source details the deployment of 700 active-duty Marines to L.A.
Active duty Marines, not National Guard.
Correct, active duty. And this deployment apparently raised serious concerns from local officials Mayor Karen Bass, LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell. The state attorney general is even trying to get a court order to block it.
Wow. What's the justification given for sending Marines?
A U.S. attorney defended it, saying local law enforcement was overwhelmed and grateful for help. Although interestingly, the source notes he seemed to mistakenly refer to the National Guard, not the Marines who were actually deployed.
That confusion itself is perhaps telling. How did veterans react to this use of the military domestically?
Also negatively, according to the sources, a retired Marine lieutenant colonel is quoted calling the LA deployment unwarranted. An Army veteran called it an overreach, a kind of militarization of domestic functions.
So again, even among veterans, real debate and concern about how and when the military is used within the U.S. borders, whether it's parades or responding to civil situations.
Precisely. It highlights these ongoing tensions. Okay, so while all this is playing out domestically, let's pivot now, because our sources also cover some really dramatic international developments.
Right. The news about Israel and Iran, what are the sources saying there?
Experts are reacting to reports that Israel just launched major attacks on Iran's military and, significantly, nuclear sites. It's being described universally in these sources as a major escalation.
A major escalation in that long-running proxy conflict between them. Can you remind listeners briefly what that means, proxy conflict?
Sure. It's basically when two powers fight indirectly,
Right.
using third parties or staging clashes in other countries, rather than full-scale direct war between themselves. Iran and Israel have done this for decades. Think Hezbollah in Lebanon, skirmishes in Syria, cyber attacks, assassinations.
But these latest strikes sound different,
Yep.
more direct.
Exactly. These appear to be significant Israeli strikes directly inside Iran. And the scope sounds pretty wide.
What kind of targets?
Reportedly, a whole spectrum. Multiple nuclear facilities, yes, but also other military installations, senior commanders in the IRGC, that's Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a very powerful force, and even reportedly nuclear scientists.
So hitting personnel as well as infrastructure, any specific locations mentioned?
Yes, near Tehran, Natanz, that's the main underground uranium enrichment site, Tabriz, Isfahan, Iraq, and Kermanshah, which apparently has an underground ballistic missile facility.
Natanz being hit is significant. Is that confirmed?
The sources say satellite photos appear to confirm Natanz was targeted, and the Israeli army stated explicitly, according to one report, that they damaged underground structures there, the enrichment hall, centrifuges, electrical systems, vital support infrastructure.
And the stated goal.
To hinder Iran's nuclear weapons project. That was the stated aim.
What about international monitors like the IAEA?
The head of the IAEA confirmed the Natanz hit. They're monitoring the situation. Iran, for its part, reported no casualties or contamination outside the site itself.
Okay. So this action, it builds on decades of hostility, right? Going back to Iran's 1979 revolution.
Correct. That's when the new Iranian government withdrew recognition of Israel, setting the stage for this long conflict.
And that conflict, as you said, involved assassinations, cyber attacks, ship attacks, foiled plots. But this feels like a step change.
It does. One expert quoted described these strikes as demonstrating Israel's full penetration of Iran, basically, showing they could hit targets deep inside the country. Another analysis viewed military action as becoming almost an inevitability, given the other options seemed less viable from Israel's perspective.
How are the two sides framing this? What are the official reactions?
Israel's military chief called the attacks a point of no return, a fight to preserve our existence. Really stark language. Said they could not wait for another moment to act. An opposition politician in Israel also publicly congratulated the army.
And Iran, defiant, I assume.
Very defiant. Supreme Leader Khamenei called the strikes a crime and warned Israel must expect severe punishment. The armed forces spokesperson echoed that, warning of a heavy price.
And there was a report about a high-level casualty?
Yes, one source reports, and we should stress it's reported, maybe not fully confirmed everywhere yet, that the IRGC commander-in-chief, Major General Hossein Salami, was killed in these attacks.
Wow. If that's true, that would be a massive blow to Iran's military leadership. Huge potential consequences.
Absolutely. Now, a key question here is the U.S. role. What do the sources say about American involvement?
It's interesting. Senator Rubio is quoted indicating that Israel advised us beforehand, so Washington knew it was coming.
Right.
But he also explicitly stated the U.S. was not involved in strikes, so foreknowledge, but no direct participation in the attack itself, according to that statement.
Yet does that mean the U.S. is clear of the fallout?
Not necessarily. The sources suggest that Iranian threats are now targeting both Israel and the U.S., which could potentially pull the U.S. into the eye of the storm, regardless of whether they fired the actual missiles.
So future U.S. decisions are critical.
Extremely critical. Decisions by the Trump administration on how to engage or not engage will directly impact Israel's ability to continue whatever campaign this is. There seems to be a big decision point coming up.
About what specifically?
About whether the U.S. should use its unique capabilities, things maybe only the U.S. possesses, to target Iran's most deeply buried nuclear facilities like Fordo. Sources suggest this is a decision that could really split the president's advisors and maybe even his political base.
A very tricky situation.
Right.
Okay, let's broaden out again. What about the immediate ripple effects? The economy? Oil markets?
Yeah, the reaction there was swift and sharp, as you'd expect. Oil markets got spooked.
How badly?
Brent crude, the global benchmark, spiked significantly. It jumped initially like 6 to 11%. Then it went even higher, up to 14% intraday, before settling back a bit to around $75 a barrel when these sources were reporting.
14% intraday. That's a big jump.
It was the sharpest spike since early 2022, apparently. Shows just how sensitive markets are to instability in the Persian Gulf.
But is that panic justified? Is oil supply really at risk long term?
Well, one analyst, Ellen Wald, offers a more cautious take in the sources. Despite that spike, she argues that the actual flow of oil from the Gulf is not materially at risk and probably won't come under sustained threat from Iran.
What's her reasoning?
Several points. One, Iran itself needs oil revenue, so disrupting shipping lanes hurts them too. Two, its own exports would be blocked if things escalated that far. Three, sea traffic can be rerouted, albeit at higher cost. And crucially, China has strong economic leverage over Iran and a vested interest in keeping oil flowing.
So market jitters might be worse than the underlying supply reality. Possibly, at least according to that analysis, but other analysts are still worried. JPMorgan Chase warned that if energy prices do stay high, it could undo recent progress on cooling U.S. inflation.
But they also noted something about the president's priorities.
Yeah, they suggested that President Trump's primary objective of maintaining low energy prices might actually act as a brake on potential U.S. policy responses that could escalate things further. An interesting political calculation.
What about the wider global economy, beyond just oil?
Paraden Al-Rafai, another expert cited, highlights the risk to an already fragile global economy. Trade tensions are already a drag, but if the U.S. gets drawn into this conflict directly, and if any remaining nuclear talks collapse completely, she warns the risk of sustained stagflation rises.
Stagflation, it's slow growth and high inflation, right? The worst of both worlds.
Exactly, a very difficult economic scenario. And Diana Reyes emphasizes the human cost, particularly for civilians in the region. Prolonged conflict means disrupted trade, disrupted travel, higher fuel and food prices, hitting populations already in crisis in places like Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, plus risks of environmental damage, public health crises.
It's a grim picture. So the huge question is, what next? Will Iran retaliate? How?
The sources speculate on possibilities, maybe attacks on targets in Iraq that could disrupt oil supplies or provoke the West without Iran having to directly hit Israel or U.S. assets immediately.
What about Iran's proxies,
Hmm.
like Hezbollah?
Hezbollah is a major factor, historically part of Iran's deterrence. But the sources suggest its capabilities might have been degraded in recent fighting with Israel. There's even talk of some resentment within Hezbollah towards Iran, maybe for holding back in past conflicts.
So Hezbollah might not automatically jump in full force.
It suggests their decision might be influenced by internal factors and their current capacity, unless maybe Israeli strikes directly threaten the Iranian regime itself. It's not automatic.
Any other potential flashpoints mentioned?
The West Bank is noted. The idea is IRGC assets there might try to stir up trouble against the Palestinian Authority, hoping to spark clashes with the Israeli military, the IDF.
And all this is happening against a backdrop of other recent incidents, right?
Yeah. The sources connect these major strikes to a pattern. Those mass pager explosions in Lebanon that hit Hezbollah, a reported drone attack near Netanyahu's house, Israeli raids in Syria targeting alleged weapons sites, foiled Iranian plots against Israelis and Jews abroad.
It all fits a picture of escalating shadow war breaking into the open.
Precisely. And it aligns perfectly with that broader geopolitical analysis source we have. It describes mid-2025 as a time of intensifying rivalries, more proxy conflicts like this Israel-Iran one, rising cyber threats to critical infrastructure, and domestic unrest often fueled by polarization and inequality.
And all this happening while international alliances are strained and trust in institutions seems to be eroding.
Exactly. It's a volatile mix.
So we've really covered a lot today. From a military parade sparking debate here at home, its costs, its symbolism.
Right, and connecting that to wider questions about the military's domestic role, like in LA.
All the way to this major escalation between Israel and Iran, with potential global economic consequences and huge geopolitical stakes.
It really underscores how interconnected these things are. Domestic politics, international conflict, economic stability. You can't really understand one without looking at the others.
It shows that making sense of the world right now really means looking beyond just the single headline, doesn't it? Seeing the patterns, the
Yeah.
links.
Absolutely. These aren't just separate news items. The way power is projected, debated, used, it all flows together. The parade, the strikes, the market reactions, they're facets of the same complex global moment.
So as you, our listeners, process all this, maybe think about those connections. How does a debate about a parade here relate, even indirectly, to the calculations being made in Tehran or Tel Aviv? And what do these events suggest about where things might be heading?
Yeah, considering both the deliberate actions and the potential for, well, unintended consequences in this kind of tense environment, it's certainly a lot to track, and staying informed across these different spheres feels more vital than ever.